thing is that 4 cities fell before Kabul fell, and the US had information that these cities were going to fall. And in July 28th, there was intel that it was presented to Joe Biden that Kabul might fall to Taliban rule within 90 days. But it was less than 30 days and Kabul fell. Anyway, that aside, there is so much political and international theories that go around it. But today, we're going to look at the legal aspect of it. So having that in mind and having placing in mind that Taliban has been characterized as a terrorist group, and Afghanistan is a state and a failed state as of 1997 through the United Nations General Assembly resolution. I forget the reference of the resolution, but I'm going to give you that in a bit. It was characterized as a failed state. So at that point, will we characterize Afghanistan as a collapsed state or a collapsing state? And for us to get into the intricacies of what a state is, we go back to 1933, the Montevideo Convention at Article 1. Article 1 of the Montevideo Convention provides for the constituting elements of a state. And those constituting elements are threefold. 1, you have to have a territory. 2, you have to have a people. And 3, you have to have a government. Now, in our case, we have Afghanistan does indeed have a territory. It does have a population, but the question comes in as to the government. The government that was there has fallen, and now it is being ruled, and I say ruled in quotes, by the Taliban. For you to understand or the catch point or the catch under the constituting element of the government is that a government is not just a government because it has power or it is the executive arm of the government or the state. It has to have effective governance of its population, and it has to have rights, and it's supposed to be able to give out or present governmental functions to its people. In our case, the Taliban, and this is where it comes down to why the people trust the Taliban. When you talk about the Taliban, you will think it's just some guys in the bush somewhere just doing their thing and, shooting rounds and coming to Kabul and taking over the city. But in real sense, they are very organized people. These guys, they have had income. They have fought for 20 years. They have been armed for 20 years. They have built bombs for 20 years. They have gone against the Britons. They've gone against the US. They've gone against other armies, and they have won as of today. A report was populated sometime in June or July by an Al Jazeera correspondent, and probably you can look it up. I think it's like a 3-minute clip where it states the income and how the flow of resources into and out of the Taliban spending has been, and it's over $1 billion in the last year alone. And that comes from exports, it comes from mining, it comes from selling poppy plants and the finished whatever of poppy. I forget the name, but it's a drug, it's like cocaine. Then they also delved into the manufacturing of methamphetamine. So now bringing us back into the issue of effective government, then we have to understand that the Taliban are really, they have their leader, then they have leaders under that leader who run certain committees. There's the financial committee, there's the legal committee, there is the commercial committee, there's so many committees, and that's why the Taliban are successful, and they've been successful for the last 20 or so years. And you also have to know that the Taliban, they have a flow, they have a structure of how they run their affairs. And then we have to then at this point ask ourselves if the government that is Taliban is a government indeed. And for us to understand the issue of government, we go back to 1917. And in 1917, what happened in 1917 was that Finland says that enough is enough. We want to move away from Russia, and they gave the Declaration of Independence. But at that point, there were no guiding rules as to what a state is and what a government is, because we see that this came up in 1933 in the Montevideo Convention. So what happens is that the Germans and the Russians bombard Finland, and in 1920, the League of Nations sends a committee of jurists to give a report as to the state of Finland as it was back then. So these guys give a report sometime in 1920, and they say that they've seen that Finland is struggling. There is no government. The governmental functions are not being disbursed as it's supposed to be, and as such, they would recommend that Finland not be taken in as a government. And so therefore it cannot be taken in as a state. So what happens is that Finland at that point, as of 1920, was not recognized as a state. Fast forward to 1960, and the Republic of Congo gets its independence, and it gets its independence without having a stable government. It was not ever prepared for independence, but it has so many problems. There are so many warring factions in Congo over their resources and over the territories and all that stuff. So we have to ask ourselves, what was the difference? What made, and in 1960, I think 62, Congo applied to be recognized as a member under the United Nations, and it was recognized. And you have to remember that it doesn't have a stable government, and it has so many issues in itself. So what changed between 1917 and 1960? What changed was that in 1960, the United Nations General Assembly formed something called the right of the people's, the right to self-determination of the people. The right to this principle of the right to self-determination of the people basically suggests that no matter what impediment faces a people, there should not be the excuse of that they're not knowledgeable, they're not educated, they do not have a stable government, they do not have a structure. That should not be an impediment into people getting the independence. And this is what changed everything. And as we see post 1960, governments have been failing. You know, we have Vietnam, we have Somalia, we have Afghanistan. States have been falling over and over. So Afghanistan, getting back into Afghanistan, the government as stands right now can actually be termed as a government, and this flows from the decision of the International Court of Justice in its advisory opinion to Western Sahara. The Western Sahara advisory opinion at page 35 and 36 and paragraphs 94, where it stated that there is no set out criteria as to what a government is supposed to be and how it's supposed to run, so long as the government runs its issues. You cannot say that haifanani na yetu. They have whatever government decides to do, that is what it's going to do. And for as stands today, the Taliban as is, as I've just said before, that it has a structure and it has a way that it runs itself, and it has a way that it makes sure that its laws are followed. You know, the Sharia laws are followed. Then at that point, it can be termed as a government. But then we go back to the issues of the international norms. So under the international norms, there are rights that cannot be broken. And there is this principle of you cannot benefit from wrongs, or events cannot be formed from a wrongdoing by a state, or you cannot form a state from a wrongdoing. And this was laid way back in 1945. And a case in point will be the Japanese invasion of the city of Manchuria. And the Japanese, what they did is that they invaded a territory called Manchuria. And then they took out a portion called Manchukuo. And what they did is they wanted to use Manchukuo as a puppet state, but the League of Nations back then said, no, this is, you've gotten it through an unarmed whatever, and we cannot take you guys as a state. And this what happens after that is that you have to realize that the international spaces are it morphs a lot. And the same thing happened for Hyderabad and India. And what happened for Hyderabad is that before India got its independence, there was a split between Pakistan and India, and certain states that were under the British protection, they were protectorate. So what happens is that these protectorates were given the choice to either choose to be part of Pakistan or be part of India. So a couple of states chose Pakistan and India, but Hyderabad had not made its decision by the time India was gaining independence and Pakistan was gaining its independence. So it was left alone. So the Indian guys decided that, we want Hyderabad. So they go and invade Hyderabad and they assimilate Hyderabad into India. And the United Nations at that point do not really do anything, but they raise that issue for discussion. But before they have their discussion, Hyderabad just says, we are going to form part of India, and that thing dies down. But essentially, that should not have been the situation if we were to refer to the Japanese and Manchuria issue that had been laid down earlier. So now, for Afghanistan, the issue becomes then the fact that the Taliban took brute force and they broke human rights and still continue to break certain human rights issues. Should they be taken as a government, or should they be given recognition as a government? And in my personal opinion, don't take this to the bank here, I think they should not be, because the violations that are continuing, violations that they're related under the Rome Statutes and Geneva Conventions. You cannot go around killing women. You cannot go around killing children. You cannot go around waging war against civilians. When civilians protest, you go out and shoot them. That's because you have the power to. It's a telltale sign of what the future of Afghanistan might be. And it's not a really pretty one. When you hear that people who are working against the government or with the government at that time and against the Taliban are being hunted in the night, and this is not hearsay. This is things that have been reported, where people have filmed them, the Taliban coming to them and placing guns in their heads and on their chests, and doing things to them. Then it really is not a telltale sign. In as much as the Taliban have their spokespeople, people saying that they're going to respect the rights of women and children. Coincidentally, about 2 or 3 months before, Chevelle went out into Taliban country. They did this thing